Jump on the Steve Trang. We real estate disruptors.
Hey everybody, thank you for joining us for today's episode of Real Estate Disruptors. Today we've got Alex Camacho and Will Wall with Alex Camacho Buys Houses. They flew in from Mexico and Los Angeles to talk about flipping houses remotely from Hawaii and Mexico. If this is your first time tuning in, I'm Steve Trang, sales trainer. Every month we help hundreds of people buy more houses at deeper margins. If you want to join us on our training calls, DM me the word sales on Instagram. I am on a mission to create 100 millionaires, and the information on this podcast alone is enough to help you become a millionaire in the next 5 to 7 years. If you'll take consistent action, you will become one. And this show is brought to you by our sister company, InvestorLift. Get access to over 2 million cash buyers. 2 million cash buyers across the country. Go to InvestorLift.com, put in disruptors to get 10% off. And if you get value today, please tag a friend below. Share this episode right now. That way we can all grow together. And we do have 2 newer shows, Pardon the Disruption on Thursdays and Certainty Talks on Fridays. Be sure to check those out. And this is a live show, so please ask your questions for Alex and Will to answer. You guys ready?
Let's go.
Yes, sir.
All right. So first question is, what got you guys into real estate?
Well, I got it back into the mortgage business. I got into the business when I was in banking, and then I went into the mortgage business. And then the Great Depression happened, the Great Debacle, and I was kind of younger. I was in my mid-20s, and didn't have that many mentors or good habits or good relationships, and kind of lost it all during that time. And then I got led into real estate by becoming a real estate agent. And I saw that there was a lot of investors during that time that were making a killing. They were flipping a bunch of houses in SoCal, houses I had seen where it's a lot more a couple years before. And so I got that kind of bug planted in me that I thought I could be a great investor. I didn't take action for some years, though. I kind of got back into lending, did some Airbnb arbitrage, and did a couple of things. But I always had that seed, Steve, that I think I could be a good real estate investor and house flipper. And so I started to kind of research back in like 2016 or so how I can get involved, because I was making some money with the Airbnb arbitrage. And so once I started doing some research, Bigger Pockets came up, your podcast came up, and I started just doing research, and a lot of it said that, hey, go work for a mentor, go work for another investor, go find somebody that's doing what you want to do. It's a very common message. So I took that and I ran with it. I found a job working for an investor that was essentially doing what I wanted to do, flipping 20, 30 houses a year, making great money, keeping the small, medium multifamily. I loved his business model, worked for him for like a year. I learned a lot, but really didn't make that much money during that time because, I was paying my dues.
So you got your teeth kicked in mortgages, right?
Absolutely kicked in, yeah.
Maybe some people are kind of experiencing that right now in mortgages.
Yeah.
So you became a realtor, and it sounded like for multiple years.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point, Bigger Pockets and this show kind of kicked it off for you. So then I'm guessing it's been in the last few years then that you started actually looking to flip houses.
Yeah, well, at the beginning of 2017 is when I started working
17.
for that
So
investor.
you were a realtor for like 9 years, 8-9 years.
Well, only for about 4 or 5, and then I kind of, like I said, I got back into like the mortgage wholesale side of things, then I worked into an Airbnb arbitrage kind of model for a little bit, and that's what led me to have some income to say, hey, and maybe this is the time for me to become an investor.
Got it. Okay. How about you, Will?
Well, I actually got my license when I was 18 years old, Steve. So I was in, my high school classes, sitting there reading the real estate, practices and principles, right underneath my math books. And I had a job, working great, realtor down in La Jolla, California. And we were just, doing great. And then college came around. And obviously I kind of put my, license on the shelf, finished up school. And like Alex mentioned, I kind of just figured out like, hey, if I had a mentor that really kind of coached me in real estate, this could take off. And that's when I kind of connected with Alex here during the pandemic and was able to say, hey, why don't we partner together and see if we can grow this real estate business together?
Got it. So you were in La Jolla.
Mm-hmm.
So at one point in my life, I lived in La Jolla.
Yep.
It was a wonderful, beautiful city. And I decided that I couldn't afford that to live there as a student. So I came back home and said, one day I'm going to go back to La Jolla. Maybe.
You and me both.
Yeah.
Once we can afford it, right?
Well, you're in LA now, so it's not too bad.
Not much of a difference in price.
Yeah. So, all right. So you decided to work with Alex. So then I guess let's go back to your story then. So you decided to get back into the investing side. What was the first transaction you did, getting into it, whether it was flipping or wholesaling?
So the very first flip that I acquired, that I worked on, was working for the other investor. I was just hitting the phones hard. I was essentially just an inside sales guy and a telemarketer for him. And I was pounding the phone for like a good 60 days or so. And then right around that 90th day, I found this foreclosure lead. I had been following up. And then, he ended up purchasing the property and he wholetailed it because we got such a great deal on it. That's one thing I really learned working with him, just how he was able to negotiate and get these deep discounted deals. And then he just cleaned it out. I think maybe spent about $5,000 and sold it and quickly made about 60 grand. And that's when it was like that proof of concept for me. I didn't make much. I was making like 2,500 a deal from him, but it was like, oh, I knew I could do this. Like
now you know it's real.
Yeah.
Where was this?
This was I was working in Burbank at the time, and the property was in Long Beach.
Okay. And so your first few deals, you were working on someone else's team.
Yeah, the first 60 deals.
First 60 deals.
Yeah. So I was working for him for a year, and then I got recruited by a bigger, I would say it's almost like a mini hedge fund type of company where they were acquiring and buying about 200 properties annually across SoCal. They had different business models, but I worked for them for about a year and a half, and I was an acquisitions
Well, before we get
manager.
into that, the reason why I'm asking this question is like there's so many people, in this industry that are very independent. They want to do everything themselves, and they don't want to hire a coach, which is something we'll talk about later on. But B, they don't want to work for anybody else either. They want to do everything themselves. But you work for somebody and did your first 60 deals underneath somebody else.
Yeah.
So talk about the value of that to someone that's listening to the show.
Yeah, of course. So learning this business kind of from a book is simple to understand. But when you're talking about all the moving parts of investing and wholesaling and sales, marketing, all that, that's very difficult to do without, like you said, either having somebody like paying a coach and then running with information that you learn from them, or working alongside or for an investor. There's nothing wrong with it. I read this book that I talk about often called Mastery by Robert Greene, and he talks about this apprenticeship phase. And I saw it as that, like, hey, I have to be, if I want to be a master real estate investor, because that was my goal, I have to somehow, learn that from someone else and go. And I did have sales skills, I did have. So I took that job initially, but I was making about half of what I normally make. But it was the learning that I was seeking, and I think people think that they could just understand the concept of doing real estate investing, and all of a sudden they could just jump into the deep end and do it on their own, which is not really. And we all know that's not how.
So you're saying that there's a difference between watching it on YouTube and reading a book, and actually being in the business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got it.
Went and did that for a second company, and that second company I learned a lot more, and they had a different business model, and I did make more money, allowed me to save more to eventually do it on my own.
So you went to go work for the second company, and you said they were buying a little bit more. So what was that experience like?
That was also a big learning experience because they were buying volume, and they were set up to buy 30 houses a month. And so not only was I seeing a lot more volume for the acquisitions that I was bringing in, but I was able to see the stuff they were buying, and they had more systems, more procedures, more things kind of in place because they were a flipping company. They weren't wholesaling, so they're actually taking the deals down. And so I just got to learn more structure. And because of that, it allowed me to also perform better because I had assistant, I had, support, and then I was able just to focus on acquisitions and get great at it and just, every day, make offers, talk to people, and just focus on that. And in that year and a half I worked for them, I helped them acquire about 54 houses in SoCal. And it was I could not be doing what I'm doing today without having had that experience.
So I've heard for many years that it is really difficult to do business in, at least in, Huntington Beach, Orange County, Los Angeles, San Diego, whatever. So what market were you guys in?
Yeah, we're Southern California.
But were you guys like inland, or were you guys like?
Well, we were mainly in core Los Angeles, like South LA, East LA.
So then what would you say to someone that says like you can't do deals in Los Angeles?
Well, I say that they're just full of crap because they're not putting in the work to actually do it, and they're just, letting other people influence them without trying themselves to do it, or find other people that are doing it and then getting alongside them.
That
and
makes
Steve,
sense.
Your market's a great example of that too. Like Arizona, you have a lot of competitors out here. So, although the price on our properties in California are a little bit higher, the competition out here makes it just as difficult. So I agree with what Alex said. If you put your mind to it and say, hey, I'm going to go get the deal, it really doesn't matter where you are.
All right.
And you typically know your areas if you grew up in these areas more than other areas. So I see a lot of people that want to go out of state, which there's a lot of value to that. But I think they give up on their own home state if it's expensive, very quickly. I think that's the wrong way to go. Because you have a lot of resources, you have a lot of knowledge, and you could leverage that. And you don't maybe need to do as many deals. Like our spreads are typically larger, so we don't need to flip 100 houses a year to make, millions and stuff.
And that's what I like a lot with you guys' model. Is like, the deals you guys do instantly, like 6 figures, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of them we get to do at 6 figures or close to 6 figures because we're dealing with higher purchase prices than maybe in other parts of the country.
So then you work with a second company. It was good. And then at that point, after that, you went on your own?
Yeah, that's when I went on my own. I saved a couple $100,000 and I had the knowledge. I had all the experience. They didn't really want to let me take a management position or something a little bit more senior that I wanted. Mm-hmm. And so we left amicably. I got them a lot of deals and I made them well over $1 million. And so we left on great terms. And, I still ended up, staying in touch with some people there. But that's when I started my company about 3 years ago.
How come you wanted to go in a management position?
Well, I just wanted more control or more ability to influence, like what I saw was working with like off market, and they were just buying off of the auction, and they were also buying on MLS with our department and some from wholesalers, but we hadn't really tapped into the off market, and I wanted to be more in charge of that because every time they gave us some great off market leads, like I slam dunked them, we got them better deals than we were buying on the MLS, and they didn't want to scale that up. There was kind of like there wasn't enough, I think, opportunity for me upside, and I had already learned enough and I saved enough. So I was like, well, if you don't want to let me kind of drive the bus, all good, but I'm gonna go drive my own bus then.
All right. So you left and did this on your own. So when did you? What year did you go off and do this on your own?
2019.
2019. Okay. And then when did you guys partner up?
Probably about 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic.
About a year and a half into it, Will came on board. Okay.
So tell me about that journey now that you're doing this on your own, because you already understand how this business works now. So what was your first deal and what kind of struggles did you have?
Well, the first deal on my own. So there were still struggles because what happened is since I had worked for other people, they bought the properties in their name, right? In their buying entity. I was not on title. I just had an agreement. They would pay me, commissions, or they would pay me bonuses based on what we agreed upon. And so when I found a couple of deals on my own off market. Well, the hard money lenders didn't want to lend me money, even though I had good credit, I had money in the bank, I had experience, kind of quote unquote. So I ended up having to partner up on a couple of deals, like joint venture, where I gave up half of the equity. But my equity partners, they brought in the money. I didn't have to actually use that money that I had saved. And I did a couple of deals that way. And then the hard money lenders then began to lend to me after like deal number 2 or 3 that I did with another joint venture partner.
What was the split on those?
I actually gave away 50% of the equity, but then we were able to, they ran the project management, because it's an area I don't like at all. I'm not great at. And then I just assisted all the way around, brought the deal, and got 50% and didn't put any money in too. So it was a win-win, but I did give up great deals. I think both of them almost made 6 figures, so I gave up a lot of equity. But
you absolutely did, right? But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because, again, for the guys that are listening right now, hard money lenders are pulling back, right? You have to put more down payment now. Interest rates might be higher. Credit might have to be higher, right? So it's a little bit harder to lend right now or to borrow as hard money.
Agreed.
But you have access to, friends and family that have capital. You can split it 50-50, right? If you don't have access to private money right now or hard money right now, you can get private money. Or if you don't have cash in your own pocket, you can get these 50-50 joint ventures. I mean, that's how I started. When it was a lot more than 2 deals when I first started, and credit was trash and didn't have cash. I was doing a lot of 50-50 deals to get my business going.
Yeah, and lean on those other people to help you, right?
Right, absolutely.
And I think another point on that is that a lot of people don't get started in this business or think that they need money. And although that is somewhat correct, you can get great at the deal finding part of it for not that much money, and then you could, like I said, take down some deals and then split them with other people. But just make sure that because I also had some bad experiences with that too, where I was. Well, that I wasn't on title, so then one of the properties like my partner wanted to keep, for example, and I knew he was more of a buy and holder, and I was, at that point a little bit more on the flipping side to build capital. So I knew he was going to want to keep it because it was a duplex, and I ended up making about $10,000 less than I probably would have, because we kind of disputed a little bit on like what is the real value he's keeping and I'm not. He's getting all the extra benefits. So there was some there, and then later on after that, what I did is I just made sure that all my paperwork was in order. I had agreements. I had stuff that before it was kind of a handshake thing. So just a lot of learning. I made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah. Well, that's the reason why we have the show. What's that?
Lessons learned.
Yeah.
Lessons learned. And again, this goes back to we're talking about it here, but until you actually do it, until you're in the weeds, and you make these mistakes, all right, and then you really learn it, right?
Absolutely.
So,
The joint venture.
yeah, so you did a joint venture, but you said there are a lot of other lessons learned. So what were some other lessons learned in that time period?
Another big one was I ended up buying another course, a wholesaling course, to get better at the off market at the beginning part. Will wasn't around yet, and I had a kind of a smaller team, but I wasn't really a great leader, and I made those mistakes of just kind of putting just cheeks in the seats, right? You know, just like, hey, this person's motivated. They send me a DM on Instagram. They seem like they're pretty smart. Like, yeah, you're operations guy. You know, you're acquisitions. And so at the beginning, I made a lot of mistakes on that too, where I was expecting kind of like higher results from kind of C players, B players, like people that were just not, you know, like at the higher caliber there. And so I started to work a lot on my leadership there. But part of the reason I mentioned the wholesaling course is because I also made a mistake where I bought the course and I wasn't really ready to implement because I had the weak team. I was a weak leader. I had too many things going on. And so I think people make that mistake too. They pay for an expensive course or they actually sign up for coaching and whatnot, but then they don't implement the stuff they're learning. They're not ready to really implement. And I made that mistake too, where, you know, I made some deals happen through that course, but I certainly didn't get the best return on investment because, again, it was a weak in implementation there. And then also I wasn't good at training people. I would just bring people on and then I wouldn't really have some type of organized structure for them to be onboarded. And so like they got, again, part of the weak leadership. So that was a couple more mistakes I made there.
And then how did you guys connect?
Well, I think obviously, you know, you guys talked on it before, right? The apprentice model. So, you know, something for me that was just super attractive was not getting those bumps, not getting those bruises that, you know, people like you guys have already gotten, right? You've already taken those L's. You've already taken those lessons. You've already gotten the hard money lenders on board. You've already gotten the track record. And so, you know, for me, I was selling, and I'm still selling Los Angeles Chargers season tickets. And so I'm going through all the different real estate offices in LA, and I'm selling agents. I'm getting them bought in on seats so that they can use it for networking, you know, for giving out to their, you know, title reps, mortgage reps, you know, everybody who helps them with their business. And once I went through all the real estate offices, I started going after investors. That's what I found Alex and was like, and we had known each other for 5 or 10 years before this. But when I really kind of started following in on him, I was like, wow, you know, and I'm going into these real estate offices giving, you know, presentations on the stadium, and you look up on the leaderboard and it's like, wow, you know, these guys are making these gross commissions earned of like, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, some of these top agents. And I would target those top agents to sell them seats. And then when you're talking to them, they're like, yeah, we're not doing this all off of, you know, retail volume. A lot of this is investment volume. And that's when, you know, the light bulb kind of went off like, hey, if I can find an investor that's already doing this and help them grow what they're already doing, you know, we could get something together. And that's what Alex and I kind of came together and, you know, we're able to do.
Did he close you?
Actually, I closed him because the first thing I was looking for someone in acquisitions at first just to help me out because I was moving to Hawaii. So I was like, oh, and you know, I know Will, like he is a closer, like he's a salesperson, and I've talked to him many times, and we're acquainted through other, you know, through the Hollywood scene before, and so I was looking for someone to replace me because I knew I wasn't going to be able to, you know, buy the deals the same way as, you know, if I'm going to be in Hawaii. So that's how he came on board. But you know, with like traction and
but you didn't buy the season tickets.
No, I didn't buy the season tickets.
No tickets.
He took me to the whole song and dance, so he didn't close me on that. I ended up closing him. He was trying to close me, I closed him.
All right, so he came to you to sell you season tickets, and then you convinced him to change careers.
Yeah, well, he was already interested, but I did convince him, like, hey, man, look, because I knew eventually he was going to go do it on his own anyway, so I was like, I might as well sign this guy, you know? Like, and that's kind of how it worked out.
All right, so you got the head start.
Yeah.
Okay, so then what was the beginning like? Because, you know, Alex is mentioning he was not quite the leader he is today.
Yep.
So what were some of the challenges when you guys first started working together?
Well, I mean, you know, one of the biggest challenges is, you know, Alex moves out to Hawaii, right? And so up to this point, I've maybe gone on 5, 10 appointments with Alex. And it's like, all right, man, you're going to be able to do these appointments on your own? And I was like, of course, me being the new guy, I was like, yeah, I can do this on my own. And, you know, little did we both know, like, this was going to turn into about a 3 to 4 month period of time where the business did not have an acquisition. You know, we were still working on our active deals that we had in the pipeline, but we went about 4 months without an acquisition. And that was, you know, probably the biggest struggle for us was, hey, is this something that we can still do? Can we still acquire properties with Alex living in Hawaii and me being the kind of the main guy here on the floor, on the boots on the ground, doing the acquisitions?
So you guys are having difficult conversations.
Yeah, a lot of Zoom meetings.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I was like,
to the point where you almost were coming back from Hawaii almost.
Yeah, well, I remember vividly coming back and thinking I was going to kill their first deal because like they got a deal, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like I didn't actually like lock it up myself. All I did was like send the EMD. And I was excited, but at the same time I was concerned. I'm like, what if they miss something? And I'm that guy that flies in and then tells them like, hey, we got to cancel this deal, or we got to renegotiate because the numbers are off. And sure enough, they didn't miss anything. But it took almost 4 months where we were just beating our heads. I didn't know if it was going to work. He didn't know if it was going to work. But we kept making the offers. We kept on, having the meetings. We kept on trying to get better. And then finally we got that deal. I'm sure he remembers the property. I still remember it. And that was kind of like, hey, we got something here now.
So for clarity, what are you guys' roles within the organization?
Well, I initially started as acquisitions, right? And again, you guys touched on this. Sometimes it's worth it to take that entry level role, right? Alex was working in acquisitions. He had already done that. He had already grinded his teeth, and gotten that experience. And so for me, it was, hey, can we get some acquisitions going? When I, first started with Alex, it was, hey, you did 10 houses, you did 12 houses last year. What if we were to double that? And then it was, okay, well, what if we could do that? And again, we're at 4 months in and we haven't gotten any acquisitions. So, the reality starts to set in like, hey, man, we might not double that. We might actually have that, and it was, hey, this is going to be a tough conversation to have. So once we got the first couple of acquisitions going, and, again, you'll notice this, Alex wanted to get into management positions. Then we kind of both had a conversation where it was like, hey, man, you're actually pretty good at acquisitions, but you have some other skills as well. And that's when we kind of said, hey, why don't you kind of take over the COO role and kind of, operate the business and push the business forward. And, Alex kind of took over the CEO role of more of the executive side of things and the face of the business and really kind of developing our big relationships that help us grow.
Yeah. So the way I would say it is Will really kind of helps run the operations and at the same time heads acquisitions. And then my role mainly, it revolves around, the higher, relationships, the social media, also, CEO's job, a lot of it's financial. So, dealing with a lot of the financial part of what we do. And then just making sure that, we have like a direction that we're going because, we recently bought our first multifamily here in Arizona, which I'm really proud to say I love this market. And, but part of all that was that, hey, we've actually started making some money here with the flipping. Do we want to own a bunch of single family houses in Southern California? We're holding some for sure. We got some great burrs, but higher level, we're like, no, and so I have to work on that higher level stuff too. We're like, hey, what are we going to do with this? Because allocation of capital is extremely important, once you start making some.
Yeah.
So I focus a lot on that, like, hey, where are we going with this? And then, and he's also great at social media as well. And he's, a great ambassador for the brand and whatnot. And he's built his own. I mean, it's funny, we joke around like when we met you at the Ryan Pineda course, I'm sure we'll talk about that, or the mastermind, like you knew who he was, but you didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
And it was fine because like, he's built his brand up and I want all my team to, to also kind of like, it's been a valuable tool for us, social media. So we continue to double down on it, everybody.
So going back to you saying there's 4 months, right, where you guys weren't buying anything. Was it because of COVID or is it because of something else?
That was a little before COVID. So it wasn't because that, it was because they weren't getting deals deep enough or they weren't getting the deals that really fit our buy box. Because we mostly, flip. So that's why we were kind of like just beating our heads like, hey, no, this deal's not good enough. This deal's not good enough. And then we finally got one.
What was the situation before and what changed?
Well, I think the biggest thing for us was really when I first got into acquisitions, a lot of people have this happen as well. They'll see how many different acquisitions models there are, right? It's okay, I could cold call, I could text message, I could drive for dollars, I could go door knocking, I could call, MLS agents, I could do those. And I tried to do all 10 of them at once.
Yeah.
And, again, I've never even had an acquisition from an MLS agent. I've never had an acquisition from any of these sources. And I'm going all in on all of these sources. And it just obviously didn't work out, right? And so I think what really kind of shifted it for us was going back to the basics, which is, hey, there's deals already on the MLS. If we can target those deals on the MLS and get them under contract, then we have an opportunity to kind of move forward.
And that's the direction you guys ended up going.
Correct.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And the initial part, he was just, doing what I was doing because a lot of my deals were from the MLS. Despite what people say, there is deals there, but you just have to get after it. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so you're living in Hawaii now at this time.
Yes.
Right, and we're talking about like, flipping 25 houses a year remotely. And, some of the challenges that occur with that. So the first one, you're like, you had to dot all the I's, cross your T's yourself, verify all the data.
Mm-hmm.
So after the first deal was smooth and it was good, did you still have those issues or was it like did trust grow? Like, how did you handle that?
Yeah, that continued to grow because it was like the trust but verify. Like, okay, I'm buying this house. Like, are we gonna make money? Does it fit the business model that we have? And then so the guy that we started to get that consistency where we're back to where we're buying a couple houses a month, and then the trust continued to grow because I was looking at numbers. Although I was remote, keep in mind I had worked on 70, 80 deals before I moved to Hawaii, and I grew up in Southern California, so like I know these areas like the back of my hand, and I know my numbers very well because I love the acquisition side. So the trust kept growing, but also they kept getting better. That's what the point is. Like I became a better leader, and they became better at everything they were doing, and then we all start to elevate and say, okay, well now we're consistent getting deals. Now we have a real business here, and then we were able to attract some private lenders. We were able to attract some other team members to kind of join the team through continuing to like show what we were working on. Because around that time too, we started our own kind of weekly webinar. Because we didn't see it happening. We didn't see like a weekly investor meetup / webinar because we didn't see anybody in Southern California doing kind of that. So we thought, hey, we should do this because we want to connect with other people around. What we're doing is starting to work. And that we've grown we like to call our deal makers tribe that way. And we have, a great Facebook group there. And it started to kind of really balloon after team started getting more acquisitions, getting better at what they're doing. And we've always continued to reinvest too, like in the masterminds, courses, all that stuff. So, I give them access to everything so that way they can continue to grow too. And that's one thing when I was getting started, I didn't like that I worked for other people, but it really felt like the people I worked for only wanted me to know just enough to make the money, but that was it. And I don't have the same mindset. I want everybody in my, organization to be, eventually to be able to own real estate for it to impact their lives as well, not just help me make a bunch of money either. Right. I want, Will is buying a house hack. We own several properties together. He's part owner in the 18 unit, but he also worked his butt off for a year and a half with me.
So why Hawaii?
Great question. Why not? It's Hawaii.
It's nice, but you seem a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Hard charging. And what I noticed in Hawaii is they drive the speed limit or slower.
Or slower.
So it's completely like there's island time, and then there's like, what we do here in America, right? Like the 48 states. The two very different speeds.
Yeah. So I would say the two main things was getting out of the pandemic in LA, and then proximity to Brandon Turner, one of my mentors. I went on vacation to Hawaii around the time, as soon as I quit the second company I was working for, I wanted to take a long vacation. I went to Hawaii. We ended up meeting Brandon. He invited me to a mastermind that was like literally 10 days later, and I said yes. I came back. That's where I met Ryan Pineda, where I built that relationship with Brandon and several other amazing entrepreneurs, investors. And I kind of left with the thought of that second trip, the mastermind, like, man, there's a lot of ugly houses here too. Like, you imagine Hawaii and you think like it's perfect, but there's a lot of fixer-uppers there too. So I left thinking like, well, what if I could flip houses in Hawaii? But it was just kind of a seed planted. But then like a year passed by, and then the pandemic hit, and then Brandon hit me up and said, hey, if you'd open to maybe working, doing some deals over here in Hawaii, why don't you you love it, come out here. So it was kind of like an open invitation, nothing too formal, and then we kind of worked some things out. But ended up he decided to kind of focus more on obviously bigger pockets and the open door capital and whatnot. But he left the door open for me to go out there, be a little bit closer to him. There's also other investors in Maui. But you're right, Maui has been pretty slow paced, but I do travel back to LA, and then about a year ago I started living part-time in Mexico for kind of that reason too, that Maui, Oahu is a little bit better fit for me overall with pace wise because there's more to do, but like Maui's special, so it'll always be close to my heart. But right now I am kind of transitioning to moving a little bit closer back to LA because we have grown the business to a point where it just makes more sense for me to be there, not so remote. But the main reasons were because I was getting out of LA. It wasn't a cool place to be during the pandemic. And
I don't think anyone liked LA during the pandemic. We had Havasu became a really hot spot.
Oh yeah.
During the pandemic. All right, so then let's talk about flipping remotely. So you're the visionary living in Hawaii. Will is executing within LA, but you guys are also in 4 states. You guys started in LA and then started adding states, or like did you guys like immediately go into multiple states because you went multiple marketing channels? So
yeah.
Well, no, it was the multiple marketing channels were mainly in LA, but when Alex landed in Hawaii and we had boots on the ground now we're able to say, okay, well, what if we were to get a property out there? Mm-hmm. So Hawaii kind of spearheaded our growth into multiple states, and then actually
once you guys live in Hawaii?
Yeah, we have about four active projects on 3 different islands right now.
Nice.
So we have one on the Big Island.
Different islands too.
Yeah, Oahu and Maui. So it's multiple islands, multiple states. If there's a deal and it needs, repairs and needs work done, it's typically something that's within our expertise. So we're going to try and get into that.
So let's talk about
So the way I would describe it is that we were, California based, and then I moved to Hawaii, so we did some deals there. But we figured that the market's a very unique market, and we'll take deals as I think that will make the most sense for us, or things that maybe we want to keep, but we're really not looking to scale that. And then we bought in Arizona because we found that to be the best for our multifamily kind of targets and goals. And then we happened to buy something in Las Vegas recently that just kind of fell in our lap. And we've got other things that have come up potentially there, but I'd say it's more accurately to say 3 states than 4. Yeah.
Predominantly LA and Hawaii.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which are nice markets to flip in. So
Yeah.
let's talk about operations, right? We're talking about how to flip 25 houses a year remotely. So like what are 2 or 3 key processes and systems you need in order to be able to flip that many houses?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of ours is our virtual team. So although Alex is in Hawaii, Mexico, I'm in Los Angeles, we do have a large team base that is virtual. And this goes well with our business model, right? Alex and I are not together all the time. We do a lot of Zoom meetings, so we're able to bring in other team members that can do those Zoom meetings for us. So the first one was, as Alex mentioned, project management wasn't really his cup of tea. And I'd be lying if I said it was mine as well. I still to this day don't know whether to use a hammer or whether to use a screw and a drill. It doesn't work well for either of us. So the first thing that we had to do was say, hey, let's take note, let's take account of what we are good at, and let's figure out what we aren't good at, and let's go ahead and bring those people in, those qualified people in. And Alex will talk about it as well, but we wanted to bring in A+ players in those specific roles because that's how we were going to elevate our team overall, was bringing in the right people in the right seats.
Yeah, so what I would say about that is the first thing is we run kind of the traction model, and where we have a all team meeting every week, a level 10 meeting. And that's been kind of the cornerstone for us because it sets the tone for the week. Everybody has kind of quote unquote their marching orders, and everything's pretty clear on what your goal is, our goal is as a company and all that. So I think the level 10 meetings that we have like every beginning of the week, we had them on Mondays, but we recently transitioned to doing more on Tuesdays because so much happens on Mondays. So I think that's one big one. And then also that weekly webinar I discussed earlier, or meetup, it kind of helped unify the team a lot because we had this kind of all purpose of like, because the level 10 meeting is internal, right? Where the team is, knows what they need to do. Everything's very clear. Everybody's aware of what's happening in the company as a whole in that meeting. And then the webinar is more an external thing where we're working together as a team to make an impact on the, where we're doing for our community and for the, where we're doing business. And I think those 2 things have helped us kind of stay together because we're all in different areas. And so just having that clear vision of this is what we're building a company, we're going to be flipping this many houses, and then we're going to do with this many houses, this much profit, we're going to position it for these type of acquisitions like the multifamily. So, as though being a visionary seems to be like cool, but it's hard because you're leading other people and the vision that you're setting is dictating like how, part of their life. So I think that's not something to take lightly. And I think, very deeply, and I consult with a lot of my mentors too, because, you don't want to lead people to failure, right?
Right.
So I think that's, but to just give a couple of tools or things that I think that have been very helpful for us, I'd say those are 2 big ones.
So going back to you were saying the virtual team.
Yep.
So virtual as in virtual in Los Angeles or virtual like virtually around the world?
Yeah, virtually around the world. I mean, we have virtual team members down in Mexico, in multiple different states down in Mexico. Alex traveling down to Mexico obviously allowed him to kind of connect with some of these people in person. And then we've also gone out and gotten some team members out in the Philippines as well.
So then the project manager is where?
That's, I think, an important piece we should mention. Being part of the Ryan's coaching program, I saw that he mentioned that there was this business model where you could just pay project managers like a flat fee, and then you don't necessarily have like a payroll employee that you're paying, $50,000-$60,000 a year. Because for us, like, since a lot of our projects are not like, LA, it's big, it's a massive territory. So having somebody drive, 2 hours from one project to others is not a good use of time. So we started to implement that, where we handpicked a couple solid project managers that we'd pay them a flat fee, And then their job was to make sure that the property, once they got the property, they had a full scope of work going, and that they had that project basically from when we bought it to when it listed. And then they would get a fee for getting that project to the finish line, at least to listing stage or refinance stage. And then we'd give them a bonus once if it hit all our numbers as well. So I end up paying a lot more of project management overall, but we don't have so much of a headache or having to manage somebody that's kind of running around with it like their chicken, like a head cut, with their head cut off.
So this guy's an independent contractor.
Kind of, yeah.
These guys. So it's multiple guys that we have in different regions of LA.
Mm-hmm.
And then now we have one virtual project manager that manages all of those people. So she's down in Mexico.
Say they provide direct support to the project managers, so that way they're like negotiating with contractors. They're doing the things that actually move the project forward, not like sitting there looking at receipts and stuff. Like they're handing that off.
So there's one person who's virtual. Where's she?
Well, it's actually two. So we had to get her an assistant. She's down in Mexico, and then it became too many receipts, too many data points for her to handle. So we got an additional person out in the Philippines that kind of helps more with the back end paperwork, so that again our Mexican counterpart can actually directly influence and help our project managers here in the States.
I love that your VA has a VA, because I remember I said that in a call once, and they're like, "How can your VA have a VA?" It's like,
she has an assistant.
They need it.
Virtual as well.
They do.
If they're superstars, they need it. So you have a VA with a VA, and she's supporting the 4 project managers, and those guys then are just are managing subsections of LA. So they're going to the properties, driving the properties, dealing with the subs.
We have a project manager for the Arizona property, and we have a project manager for the Hawaii property, and then we have 3 project managers in LA. So
they're all independent, so they don't need you. Like, you're not feeding them directly. They got other projects they're working on.
Yeah. So they work on other. One of them is an avid investor. Sometimes we'll partner up on a deal in there. Sometimes he'll lend us money on a deal. But he's just like it's kind of a hybrid relationship that developed where he wanted to flip more. Because he holds a lot, and then we want to hold more, and then he is in Antelope Valley, an area that's a little bit remote in Southern California. So that's worked out very well. And then we've kind of groomed another one of our project managers that he had the profile, the type of personality profile for a project manager, not acquisitions, and he's been an absolute stud. And then we also have someone else that's kind of more in the Joshua Tree area, and that's kind of remote. So we partner up on a deal, and then we end up buying a couple properties that he's managing. So really, it's since rehabbing property is a real pain in the neck. The person that's in charge of getting that project to the finish line is very important. So I don't mind paying them a little bit more, and then maybe having some more payroll employees. I like that business model for us. It's worked for us. Yeah.
Got it. So then we were talking about the tools. Let's talk about sourcing. Like, how are you finding these deals to flip?
Yeah, I mean, again, if you look across our portfolio, a lot of our transactions are coming from the MLS, but a lot of ours are coming from social media. We have, like Alex mentioned, the Facebook group, the webinar. We just hosted an event in Los Angeles, a massive real estate investor networking event with over 250 people that were out interested in investing. And at some point, those people will get to a deal, they will get to a project, and they will need help with it. And as long as we're there and we've been providing value throughout, we've seen a good deal flow come to us from just people within our network, within our tribe, that have seen our success and have heard us talk about our success and have said, "Hey, Will, I don't want those bumps and bruises either. Can we partner on this deal and get this thing to the finish line together?"
So building a community.
Community has really been important for us.
So we have we've done the off market, we've done the cold calling, we've done text messaging, but in the last 6 months to 8 months, with the last year, I would say the majority of our deals have come from wholesalers, relationships that I've had in the past, MLS, social media, networking. It's all kind of combined. But part of it has been that and I heard this from somebody at a mastermind before, and I ran with this. Like you need to become like a buying entity. You need to become like a known buyer in your area. And that seems pretty obvious, but it takes some time. There's a lot of people in your market, so that's the long game, right? That's what social media is. So we've kind of doubled down on that because we've seen it work. But we've and we also have a very specific buy box. Like, we're not trying to go do a bunch of ADUs, or we're not trying to do a bunch of the new development. We're great at flipping entry level single family houses across SoCal. There's a lot of price points there, a lot of territory to cover. So that's what we do. And we'll take a heavy rehab here and there, but that'll have to be a much more deep discounted deal, because it's going to take some bandwidth from the kind of cookie cutter stuff that we're kind of doing already. So we've took our bumps and bruises, and we'll take on some heavier projects, but we're good at a certain business model, and we just kind of lock in on that, and
Sure.
people kind of know like this is what they're looking for, so they think of us because we're also kind of constantly out there.
So one thing, I was actually on a call right before this, where I was consulting with a guy. He's talking about he just wrapped up a very ugly business divorce, right? And I've said this on the show many times, right? I think partnerships are really hard to manage, and it's really difficult to keep everybody happy. But I'm also one of the biggest hypocrites because I have way more partners, I think, than most people I know.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you guys maintain a good partnership?
Great question. I mean, I think the biggest thing for both of us is every year we kind of sit down and we talk about both the company goals, our individual goals, and where we both see the company going. So, we've had conversations where Alex has said, "Hey, Will, you know what? I could see myself exiting the company in a couple of years and kind of just letting you take over." And then we've had conversations going the other way, which is, hey, we could really grow this into something really big together over the next couple of years. And I think as long as at every stage of the partnership, you reconnect and you realign and you make sure, hey, your goals are the same as my goals, and we're both hitting both of our goals. And if we need to adjust any of those goals, we can do that together. That's been one of the biggest things on our end, I think, keeping our partnership happy.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say that we come across this term kind of roles and goals, and we talk about it often because our roles are evolving. The role he has is different than when we first met. So is my role. So I think as long as we're both feel like we're making an impact, we're accomplishing our goals. Like one of his big goals was to buy his own property, house hack it, and I'm happy that he's got that done. He's right at the finish line and on getting that done. And he's helped out so much with managing the team that I frankly don't really want to do that much of, because it's not really I don't like managing people that much, and he's much better at it than I am. So I think and then when we talk about revenue and we talk about that, like there's a constant conversation that, because just like I left that other company, I probably would have stayed longer if they just given me kind of a couple things I wanted that really frankly I deserved from all my production, but they didn't see it that way. So I have a very open policy with Will. Like, let's talk about it every year. If we need to talk about it sooner, we talk about it sooner. Because for me, it's not about just all numbers and zeros and all that. It's about what we're actually building, and if it's benefiting all of us, and we're gonna both get to our goals. If that's gonna be together, let's do it together. If it's gonna be somewhere where we go different directions, then let's talk about that and be amicable about that. But I think we both recognize that we can kind of build something better together than apart, because I do things that he doesn't do well, and vice versa. And then I'm not greedy and he's not greedy. We're not like counting pennies. Like, oh, hey, I paid for that. I paid for that. And that's what I liked about Will from the beginning. That it was all about getting the results, getting the work done, and then like we know we'll make money. And he never complained about not making money at the beginning. And a lot of people that wanted to work with me did. And those are people that didn't stick around, because when the hard work showed up, they left. But Will kept on showing up, and that's why we're here.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of valuable lessons there if everyone is watching. I mean, me personally, right? Like I just went through, Max and I, we parted ways. It's an amicable breakup. But, listening to you talking about, annually, like let's compare, like what do you want? What do I want? What's the direction for the company? And we didn't do that. So that's totally on me for not, intentionally doing that. So.
And sometimes you get lost, right? You think everything's going good. It's like, hey, we don't need to do that. But like Alex said, sometimes it isn't annually.
Yeah. Right.
Sometimes it's midway through the year. It's like, hey, do we need to discuss something now? And as long as we kind of make sure that we have the right alignment, we've gone through obstacles before, and we'll continue to go through them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think part of that being the remote has made me be more conscious about that. And I, not only with him, but with the rest of the team, and checking like, hey, do you still like working here? Do you still like, and we've, one of our long-term virtual assistants, she's going in a different direction, but it's amicable. And, because people roles change, so you can't expect people to be happy forever, but you got to check in with your team and see where things are at, because if they're not engaged, that's also affecting productivity and morale and all that. And I noticed that recently Will had gotten a little bit, he was frustrated with some of the results of the virtual team was doing, and then it was reflecting, and we had to kind of group up and say, hey, where are we going with this? And we got to kind of get things back on track, and we do that constantly.
Yep. And then the other thing I want to talk about was private capital. So you guys have raised over $3 million private capital. So I was saying earlier, for a lot of guys that can't get hard money, right? Like, hey, you can just go 50-50 with people. But you guys, on top of that, raise private capital. Talk about that journey.
Yeah, so I was using my money for forever that I had saved up and continued to use, and we were flipping houses. But when it got to a point where we were getting more opportunities presented to us, then we were able to to actually fund ourselves. Yeah. And that's where we went to, turn to certain, initial early on money partners that came in and said, hey, we want to invest with you. for a long time I didn't want to take any private capital just because I wanted to prove that with my own money that I could do this, and I'd work for other investors. And it's cool and all when you're working for other investors, you're making less money, but you're also using their money. And so I think sometimes you forget that, because when it comes to wire that money to close escrow, it's a different feeling, right? And so I did that for, I'd say, a good dozen or more deals, and then we started coming across, Will came on board, and we're like, hey, we got to raise some more private capital. And for me, it's like owing money to people, you have a responsibility, a duty, and all that. So I didn't want to do too much of it. It was just like, let's friends and family. So we started working with friends and family that reached out to us, that were more kind of, they wanted to invest with us. And then once we kind of tapped out those resources, we started to do a little bit more of a process where we were actually searching for private money. And through coaching with Ryan and all that, we just learned that, hey, these are the proper documents that you need to have. This is kind of the expectation. This is kind of the returns and or what we typically pay people. So we just got a process around it and got more intentional about it, because we realized, like, hey, we're kind of capped out at a certain amount of houses if we're not able to bring in more capital. But yeah, so we love our private money lenders.
Well, how are you adding? Like, how are you adding more private money? What are some activities that you're doing to find more private money?
So social media is one big one. Also the meetups that we host and people that are getting started. We provide also not only obviously providing them a return on what they make, but then also we provide them access to the business, to the training, to the team, to all the transactions we're working on. Kind of like an open book policy, because these are private lenders from different, they're all different, right? Some of them want to get into flipping. Some of them just want to, invest passively and let their money work for them. So we really provide full access to us, so then that way we can kind of help them grow, and then we're going in addition to the money side of things, of interest and returns and all that. Yeah.
But on that note, I mean, it's something that we always talk about, and Alex and I are constantly finding out, like, what are the bigger rooms that we can put ourselves into that have these bigger players in them, right? Like, how can we get into that ballroom or that gala or that soiree that's happening in town where there's going to be other big people in that room that just intrinsically you can end up doing business with, right? So I think it's we always say in business, we're looking for deals, we're looking for contractors, and the most important of all of those is we're looking for money, right? So it never stops, and we're always constantly kind of looking for money. When we purchased our 18 unit here in Arizona, that was when we actually found out like how good we were at raising private capital. I mean, Alex and I were able to raise close to $1 million in less than a week to get this thing closed, when our biggest raise before that had maybe been a couple $100,000 in a week.
Yeah.
The other thing too, you guys just mentioned, Ryan Pineda. So when I first met you guys, it was at a Future Flipper event. So talk to me about mentorship and the value there.
Yeah, so I met Ryan originally at the mastermind at Brandon Turner's event, and I was already a fan of his. So I had already been following him and saw what he was up to. But then we got that personal connection. Couple months later, after the mastermind with Brandon Turner, he calls me up and wanted me to vet out a deal in LA that he randomly got. And so I gave him the information he needed, ARV and all the comps, and then he presented me the option to buy the property, and it fit our box. So we bought it, and he made a huge wholesale fee. We made a huge rip on it too. And it just was like, all right, cool. Well, not only do we do this mastermind, but we kind of made some money together. So that helped, build that bond there, right? And then like another 4 or 5 months later, he launched his program. He started bringing in students, and he told me that he wanted to help me get to the next level. And we had already made money together, and like I said, I already respected him because he was doing kind of something similar that I want to do, kind of really build the business. And so I joined this program about 2 years ago. It really helped out with the leadership side, the structure side, little kind of nuances, right? Like the project management we just talked about. All these little nuances that you learn along the way from other people, other courses or masterminds are super valuable, but you got to implement them. And then, about a year and a half ago, or a little bit more than a year and a half ago, when Will joined, right away I put him in as kind of like my partner within the mastermind, within the course. And then so he started coming along with me into the masterminds and stuff. And we've gone to pretty much every quarter because of the connections we make, the community that's being built out, and just kind of staying on that cutting edge of like what's really happening in our industry. It's been super valuable. So I don't know if we'll have anything to add to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I know, Steve, you're a part of CG. You pay mentors.
Oh yeah.
You are a coach. You are a mentor. So I think it goes both ways, right? Like as Alex and I mentor these people that are coming to the webinar, that are coming to the meetups, to the masterminds that we're hosting. on the other side of that, we have to constantly be getting better and better as well. So, when we identify something in our business and it's like, hey, maybe we're not as good at sales. Well, who do we go to? We go to Steve and we go, hey, you know what? We need to get our guys this Steve Trang coaching program because we need to improve our sales processes.
Yeah.
When we see social media is blowing up, we say, okay, who's the biggest social media coach out there? And we go and we, hire on Ryan Magine because we want to be doing the same social content that everybody else is doing. And at some point, you just have to decide, like, you're either going to figure it out yourself, and that takes away from the bandwidth of you doing your best activities. Like, my best activity wasn't figuring out how to do sales. Yeah. You had already done that. So I didn't need to have to go through that whole journey of finding out how to do sales. All I needed to do was pay a couple $1,000s, take a weekend of my time, and that just, truncated 5-10 years of your sales experience into a weekend for me.
Yeah.
So again, it goes both ways. Like, as you grow, you also have to continue to grow.
So we're about to play this commercial, but before we play this commercial, just kind of, just warm them up for it. So how did coming to our event help you guys with your business?
And I mean, we came to your sales training, and I would say within, arguably the next 3 months, we probably went from that 4-month dry stretch to like acquiring 11 to 15 deals in the next 3 or 4 months. And that's over the course of, one mentorship, one training program, one weekend, of getting better.
So 11 deals, your guys' margin's a little bit larger. So safe to say over $500,000 worth.
$5,000, $10,000 turning into $500,000. Like, I would be at the bank, first person in line every morning if I could make that investment.
All right, perfect. So we're gonna go into the audience's questions. Before that, we're gonna take a quick commercial break.
His sales training is unbelievable, right? There is other sales training in theory. Going through this stuff with how he breaks down his business is like invaluable. Because there's no other way to get this type of access with someone who's such an open book about every little thing that is completely applicable to my business.
Anyone who wants to bring their business to the next level, anyone who wants to close 30, 40, 50% more of the deals, there's no one who wouldn't benefit from being better at sales.
Anyone in real estate, anyone that has any entrepreneur that has a business, not all the information may be presented to you, but time management, knowing how to work with people, having sales skills, because I think we're all in sales and marketing, and it could present to anybody, honestly.
I would have to say it's asking questions. That's the biggest thing. You don't want to give an answer right away, and if you're able to, answer their question with another question. And also that along the process, it's going to be very uncomfortable talking to the sellers, asking the questions that you need to, and digging for pain. But that's going to come with experience. So,
if you're struggling, I think this is the event that you need to come to make sure that you take your business to the next level.
It's a good question. Superpowers. So glad you asked.
His sales training is
All right. So on Instagram, we got Gav Bear, and he is newly married. So he wants to know, should he rent or should he try to buy a house and rent out the basement?
Well, I'm a huge fan of the house hacking strategy, which is, if you don't know what it is, simply put, you buy a duplex, you live in one, you rent out the other, and there's a whole bunch of versions of that. So I'm more of a fan of that. If you can qualify for a low down payment loan, if I were to go back, I say this very much often, I would buy the biggest, most beautiful fourplex that I could afford on a low money down loan.
FHA financing
in a prime area of Southern California. That's what I would do first.
Yeah, I read about that in Robert Greene's book, Multiple Streams of Income, right? A long time ago. Never executed it, but it was like before it was, house hacking. These gurus are talking about it many years ago. You have the same opinion?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I'm personally buying a house hack. I'm not, recently married, but I've been dating for, 8 or 9 years now. And so I could see myself being in that shoes, in a couple of years down the line. And the main thing for me was before I got married, I wanted to make sure that I had a house. I had that stability. And so, I would agree that if you get a house hack, then you can have somebody else helping you pay down that mortgage And
Yeah.
if you're a newly married couple, if you're, newly expecting a child and you have those other expenses coming down the line, having that other person help you out with your mortgage expense goes a long way.
And a quick story on that. I actually house hacked my apartment. I didn't own a little bit, right? I did Airbnb on the other bedroom. It was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment, and it helped me become an investor because I was not paying that additional $1,200 rent. It was being paid by the Airbnb, and so I would be able to save more money and all that. So there's so many ways you can do that.
Yeah. And it sounds more complicated than it really is, right? Because like when I was living in La Jolla, I was renting a 3-bedroom apartment, and I got the master, and my 2 buddies rented other 2 rooms, right? That's for more, or all intents and purposes, what house hacking is. Just you're getting a mortgage versus you're splitting the lease a few different ways.
Yeah.
And essentially, you guys were paying that guy's mortgage, but he just didn't even need to live in the house because you guys were paying it. So
Yeah, no, pretty much, right? So, now the challenge then is he's got newly married, and if his wife's cool with it. That's great. Challenge is if we try to buy it today, a 4-plex, and getting the wife to agree to living in a 4-plex might be a challenge.
And that's why I said the biggest, because there's a 4-plex where there's tiny units, and there's 4-plex where it's almost like 4 houses on one lot.
Yeah.
Right. Or like a 4,000 square foot 4-plex that
That's a good point, right? Because I remember
people didn't think like a multifamily and I'm next to my neighbor. No, there's some that are like you buy a duplex where it's a whole different lot. They're over on that side. It's like 2 different houses. So.
Yeah, I remember now thinking back in the Orange County, my wife's family, they live in a duplex. I was like, this is a duplex? This is not.
These are 2 separate units.
Yeah, this is not a duplex. But yeah, that's a really good point.
Duplex sometimes has a connotation of like the shared wall. And like Alex said, you could have a 4-plex with 4 buildings, their own 4 garages, just on the same parcel.
Yeah.
And that would work.
That's a great point. Mubarak Hussein on YouTube wants to know, are you guys doing virtual wholesaling?
Not much virtual wholesaling because, again, our model because we have expertise with the project management, because we're able to get those project managers in different areas, we don't wholesale much. Most of the deals that come to us already fit our buy box, and our buy box is a flipping business. So by virtue, we're not wholesaling much. Now we do wholesale deals that we get under contract that don't fit our buy box, but that might fit somebody else's buy box. But again, we're mostly targeting those deals that do fit our buy box. So it's not that we're running a virtual wholesaling business, although we do some virtual wholesale.
Just wholesale what you don't buy.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that there's a distinction to like different business models. Which one, are you going to run? And for us, it is more of what we're talking about, the flipping and then keeping some and then wholesaling some, as opposed to just pulling big lists and then just going really broad and then just wholesaling whatever you get under contract. Kind of like different business models.
So, question from me is, has your guys' buy number changed in the last couple of months?
Yes, it has.
How have you guys modified your buying calculations?
Yeah, so we believe on certain areas that we're seeing based on, we track inventory religiously every single day on what's happening across the markets that we're doing business in. And in some markets that we're seeing a much higher increase in inventory, we're, say, for example, we had to buy at 70% of ARV. Now we're going to have to buy at 60% of ARV, and we're going to increase the rehab budget by more because of inflation. So really, like, we're buying now closer to 55 to 65% of ARV, where before we would buy some deals up to maybe even 75 because it was a light rehab and, it was going to be quick back to market. So for us, we have adjusted our numbers on the ARV and on the rehab cost. And so if it doesn't fit that box, then we're okay with buying less property right now, because we are seeing a transition, and we have seen retail buyers falling out of escrow on several of our properties and asking for huge credits that we haven't seen, in the last, before this correction and that we're seeing. So we're making adjustments based off what we're seeing on the sales side as well.
And then with what you guys have going on, have you seen, have you gotten stuck with any purchases that you guys were kind of stretching to make it work? Or
we definitely have some properties that we still have in our portfolio, and we're working on exit strategies on those. We have a couple properties that we have listed that maybe haven't gotten the feedback that we would have thought they would. But I don't think that that's necessarily anything to do with our business model. I think it's just more of, the economics of the world are shifting. When inflation goes up, it's not just us that feel that, it's the everyday buyer that feels that as well. And so their cost of living is going up, and that means that, like, Alex and I talked about this the other day. It kind of, and we talked about this because David Green has a great book on investing in a recession. And, Alex and I were talking, like, it seems like the market kind of truncates from both sides, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's going to be downward pressure at the lower price points and pressure at that upward price point, because that family that could barely afford a $1,500 mortgage before certainly can't afford a $1,900 mortgage now.
Right.
So it's gonna really put pressure on both sides.
Yeah, so we've definitely seen it. But we have multiple exit strategies on properties, and then some of them, instead of making what we thought we're gonna make less money, or the ones that are just taking a little bit longer to sell than a week. Instead of taking a week to sell, it's taking a month. So 1 more month of holding costs. So it's not like we're gonna lose money on these deals, but it is helping us now identify where the market is at in those particular areas. So then we can now reflect if we are gonna buy in that area again. Well, now we kind of know from the sales side what's happening. So track a lot of data, make sure that any buys going forward are kind of recalibrated to where the market is at and going.
And I'd almost say it gives us an advantage having inventory that we're currently selling, because a newer investor right now might be like, well, where is the market going? And we actually have those data points right in front of us. So as we sell one, we know, hey, now we know this is where the market would come down to, is right about here, right?
Yeah, and we use that often too with the wholesalers and or the agents, everybody that we're working with and negotiating deals with. Where I tell my acquisitions guys, like, hey, right now is a great time. You have a lot of leverage. You have a lot of facts in your favor, and so you're going to need to make more offers. You're going to need to get into more opportunities to get the same amount of deals. So if you're not willing to work twice as hard to make like half the money, that's a bit of an extreme kind of statement. But if you take that approach in this market, then you'll get the better discounted deals. And that's what we need right now. You need to be ultra conservative if you're flipping, and that's what we're doing.
Yep. And then Gary Tatarian on YouTube. What is an example of a typical JV corporate structure? So if you are doing a deal with someone else, you're partnering up on a deal because you have one guy who took it under his title.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do it correctly today, do you have two different LLCs splitting the expenses and splitting the equity? How would you do it today?
Well, yeah, the joint ventures that we do now, typically there'll still be one person on title, but then we'll have a very specific, and I mean very specific, joint venture agreement that's notarized. So then it's something that's specific. Like, hey, if our goal is to flip this primarily, we'll consider wholesaling it, and if worst case scenario we have to hold it, this is how it's going to work out. So I think we're just very specific in our language, and then we get those documents. Now we do have another structure where we're just kind of on the same LLC. That one isn't as common because if it's just like one deal off, it's we'd rather just have we don't want to complicate things sometimes with the hard money lenders and everything. So we try to keep it more simple on that. Like my Hawaii house, for example, one of the houses there is a joint venture, and my partner's on title, but we have a very, very kind of specific joint venture agreement, along with some other stuff that that is guaranteeing that like I'm gonna get my share of that property. So I think you need to have all that kind of dialed in if you're gonna do a joint venture. Just make sure that everything's very specific because you're dealing with real estate. So what's gonna happen if someone wants to keep it, or what's gonna happen if you don't get your price, you have to hold it. So those things need to be included inside of your agreement. I believe are very important.
Yeah, so that's really smart. I've never done any of those things, but like, it's really smart.
I'll jump on that too. I think with the joint venture side of things, right? Like Alex and I talk about the roles and goals for us with our business. Well, this is somebody that's joining into your business for this particular project. So you really want to lay out, what are your roles? What are your goals? Is your goal to get 2 or 3, joint ventures under your belt so that you can now go to a hard money lender and say, hey, look, I've done deals.
Mm-hmm.
Well, great. Then if that's your goal, then maybe we're going to take some other goals on our end and say, well, our goal is to make more profit on this deal than if you were to, take a 50-50 split with us.
Yeah. And it's helpful too, because recently I think of this deal that we're doing right now in Maui, this house that we're flipping there. I originally was going to be a joint venture, and we had a super specific joint venture agreement. But at the 11th hour, he had some issues with, the other partner had some issues with their family and whatnot, and he has to be bought out. And when I looked at the numbers, I'm like, okay, well, he offered me a fair buyout of a $30,000 basically fee that he was going to take, but us having a very specific joint venture agreement allowed that conversation and that to all turn out well, because his role was going to be project management, and he's saying, well, I can't fly to Hawaii no more. I'm like, well, if that was your role in this joint venture agreement, now you can't do your part of your role. You brought the deal and you were going to project management. I was going to fund everything. Now you're not doing your part of it. So now we have to kind of pivot And then that's when that's when we discussed, okay, what do you want, a fair buyout then? And he offered me 30, and I took it because then I saw more upside on doing that. And it was very fair. So, but having that specifically laid out allowed us to say, okay, well, you're not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to do that. So let's have a conversation. Then what are we going to do from here? Because we were at the closing table.
Yeah, it's really smart. On Instagram, does anybody have an acquisitions position in Honolulu or Honolulu, Oahu? Are you guys hiring anybody over there?
We're not currently looking for acquisitions people, but send me a DM. I do know several investors that are on Oahu that potentially might be a better fit.
Without a doubt, I know a couple that we could think of that are looking to scale their businesses out there, and if you're the right fit, it would work.
Yeah, just depends how good they are.
I've heard, and this is just totally like hearsay, right? Like I haven't done any due diligence on this. I've heard that it's more challenging in Hawaii because they prefer to sell to their fellow Hawaiians. So have you guys ran into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's definitely there's those challenges that when you're dealing with more local Hawaiians, and I mean it's a difficult situation. It really is, because if you look into the history of things, it's you'll understand why they feel certain ways. But if you're not local, then not only when it comes to business, but in other ways too, visiting locations, all that. So you feel that kind of like a vibe of you're not as welcome, and people think of Hawaii, they think of aloha, they think of just paradise and whatnot. But we all think of it paradise. We go there, but imagine all the people there that had people just come in and off their island constantly. And so I kind of get both sides, but I can't say that it's been easy to deal with like that, because I'm trying to make the island better, right? Like we say that we're making the world better one house at a time. But if they're unhappy that we're even owning property to begin with, then I can't help that, So right. Yeah, there definitely is some of that you'll doing business. It's a unique state to do business in, but there's a ton of appreciation. So like our deals have appreciated crazy. So it just, every market's different, and its challenges and its opportunities.
I think of, like you're saying, that's what you see on pictures, and then it's like when you live there, right? Because like visiting there is like, oh, like there's a lot more to what you just see on TV. Yeah. And it's kind of like social media, right? Like on social media, you only see the best, right? When you don't see the ugly parts of Hawaii on TV.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's a fantastic location, fantastic market. But yeah, doing volume there is like not easy, and it's better just to kind of, I think for us, just be very selective on the deals we do there, because also the labor is extremely difficult and the material sourcing. So there's all those additional challenges when you're actually rehabbing as well.
What's the difference in cost of materials over there versus here?
Well, we used to run like about $50 per square foot in Southern California, and in Hawaii we noticed that it was almost double that.
Almost double.
So it really is crazy. I'm like, what? Like, it's 1,000 square foot house is gonna cost like like $150,000 to rehab, when LA that would be 70, 75. So it's like it's like the same kind of size house. It's just the labor costs are insane, and just difficult.
And material costs
We've
too.
actually had to fly crews in from the mainland, from Southern California and other parts of the United States, to help us rehab properties in Hawaii. And it's common, because like the guys that are good are very busy,
There'll
or
be
they're too
two good
expensive.
electricians on island, and they're both booked out for 8 months. And you're like, okay, so I can't get an electrician at my house then for 8 months? Well, that's not going to work.
Yeah. So a bunch of additional nuances with that, and we just had to make it work. You got to figure it out.
Yep. Gary wants to know, have you done any nighttime manta ray diving in Hawaii?
No, I haven't. I've heard of that on the Big Island, but I have not. It's a little scary being in the water at night.
So Property Warehouse on YouTube, for your flips, are you hiring GCs or are you bringing them on staff payroll?
No, we typically have the project manager, and they sub it out, and they work with all, so they're acting kind of as our GC.
And Brian Davila wants to know about garage grinding. What is that?
Garage grinding. What's up, Brian? I don't know what that is.
He's saying, ask Alex about his days in the garage grinding.
Oh, okay. He's mentioning that, and we talked about this a little bit this podcast. I bought it was my best deal up to date. Now I've done better deals than that, but I bought this house subject to, so I took over the mortgage. It was creative finance deal, and then I did a whole office setup in my garage, because it was a huge garage, and it was already kind of set up as like storage. So I built this like kick butt office that, I mean, it really felt like it was an actual office. Nobody knew it was my garage. I started my Instagram and everything from there. Later on, when I showed it, everybody was like, "Oh my God, like you were like grinding in your office, in your garage. We didn't even know this." So I think that's what he's mentioning it. But it was great, because I did Airbnb on the 2 bedrooms, and it was a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house. It was just me and my girlfriend at the time. We're living there, so we'd be in the back part of the house, and then we Airbnb the front. So we cut that deal up so many different ways, and then I held on to it for almost a year and a half and sold it for like almost no like taxes. So like it made like six figures on it. But all that kind of started a lot of my company and my start in social media and some of the stuff there in that garage.
That's funny. And then do you ever joint venture with the GCs for that you're contracting out?
So we've thought about that before, and I think when you get to a certain point in business, like we're doing the project manager model right now, right, where we have project managers that handle the scope of work and handle the subcontracting on all those deals. But at a certain point, and this comes back to our overarching theme of roles and goals, right? So if a contractor were to approach us and say, hey, my goal is to help you guys grow your business from doing 25 flips this year to doing 50 flips next year, and my role in doing that would be to, speed up your guys' construction timelines, help it so that you guys don't have any of those construction issues, pretty much mitigate any issues you would have on the construction side. All you guys would need to do now is worry about acquiring and funding these. And that would eliminate that. You're looking for deals, contractors, and money. So if somebody were to approach and say, hey, I can eliminate one of those things, you'll never have to look for that again, then that would be something that we've talked about would be of interest.
Yeah, we've looked into it, but it hasn't turned out yet. I know other investors that have done it and partnered up with their GCs, but we haven't. Well, what I do want to say, though, about like, partnering up with people, because sometimes people will approach you with a partnership, but it's really favored in their side, right? I think one big thing for us is constantly having this mindset of like, it has to be a win-win or like we're not doing the deal. And that has to do with buying a property. That has to do with partnering up with something specifically. Because I've had people offer me money to lend it, but then they want, they're going to lend 50 grand and they want half the deal. It's like, I'm sorry, dude, like that's not going to work out. But if you're going to, fund the whole deal and put up $250,000, then we have a discussion.
We can talk,
but, so sometimes you'll get offered in business and in this business, like bad deals. So just make sure that you're analyzing it is kind of a true win-win, whatever that context might be.
Yeah. Gary's follow-up question on YouTube is, any advice for any up-and-coming acquisitions people? What should they focus on?
One acquisition strategy.
Any advice for anyone that's in acquisitions? What should they be focusing on?
One acquisition strategy. Don't do what I did and try to do a little bit of texting, a little bit of driving for dollars, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Like just focus on one thing. Like Alex said, if you just sit down and you grind and you get on the phone and you make 6 hours worth of phone calls and you do that for a couple of days in a row, you're going to be much better than you were the first day. If you spend 30 minutes doing some text, 30 minutes doing some driving for dollars, you're just never going to get to that A+ level on one of those marketing strategies.
Yeah. I would say that acquisitions that you need to focus heavily right now, understanding like the perception of the market and then also the real data, because those two things will help you negotiate deals. Is like, hey, I understand this is where things are at, but hey, this data says this. But just having ammunition in your conversations, I think, is extremely important, because people are like, oh yeah, the market's kind of there. But if you talk to somebody about the market and you're not giving them actual real numbers, or you're not actually disclosing to them like, hey, this is what we're seeing, then you're missing an opportunity to potentially, like you say, uncover pain, because there's going to be a lot of pain right now in this market and a lot of opportunities in that for people to help, for you to help homeowners and to put good deals together. But right now, I think you really got to look deeply right now your skill set, and then find out like what's really happening in the market. And I arm my team with like real numbers on what's happening, so you can justify these kind of low offers that we're having to submit right now that people are maybe thinking they're a little bit crazy, but that's what we're seeing. So that's
So another question from Gary. He's put this out for me, but I want to start with you guys first. A deal of a lifetime comes around once a week. Do you guys find this to be true?
I do not. I think that a deal of a lifetime comes around maybe every month at most, or every quarter. I don't think every quarter, I would say.
I would agree on the deal of a lifetime. However, every day there's a deal. Like Alex and I talk about this every day. When you wake up, if you wake up with the notion that there's a deal out there, I'm going to go find that deal. There's no set script or set, rule book that says, hey, because Steve's been doing it this long, he's going to get that deal. Like, there's a deal out there. Now, that might not be the life-changing deal that comes to Steve's lap, but there's a deal out there every day that you can go get, and that deal could change your life.
What do you think, Steve?
So for me, I think maybe not once a week, but I believe it's once a month. I mean, I get these things that are offered to me on a fairly regular basis. Like, these are opportunities like a year ago. Like, I would given up an arm and a leg for. And today it's like, I can't do it right now.
No.
Right? Like, just don't have the capacity. So I think the big thing is the capacity, the ability to do it, right? Like, if I bring a deal to you right now that's, I don't know, fire damage, crazy deeds, right? Like 20 heirs. Like, today, like, I can't do this deal. I don't have the resources. But if you had the resources, right? If you knew how to find all those heirs, if you knew how to negotiate all those different situations, you knew how to deal with the city, with the fire, figure out the insurance situation. Like, if you had all the skill sets, then it's an easy deal.
Yeah.
But for us, or at least for me, it's like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
That's not a deal for
I
me.
don't find 20 years right now. I'd rather not.
Yeah.
right?
Exactly, because most great deals are created, they're put together. And one of my best deals in Hawaii was created because of all the experience I had. And I was able to negotiate with that savvy seller and his lawyer. And I was able to present a seller financing option that in the past, I wouldn't have known how to present.
Right.
And I was able to figure out all these little things. But when you're in the game long enough, you're more likely to hit a home run.
Yeah.
That's why I look at it too. It's like, you're not going to hit a home run maybe unless you're like a home run hitter. But let's just give an example. Like, if you're in the game long enough, you'll get a home run. And the point is, though, you got to stay in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to have the capacity, the resources, the wherewithal. There's a lot of different pieces, and then if that's the case, then it will. And it might just be as a deal of a lifetime for other people, but maybe not for us anymore.
Yeah,
Correct.
That's true.
All right. At what point do you change your strategy from flipping to holding, and why? That's Roger Villa on Instagram.
Great question. We get that asked a lot. So for us, we're building a flipping company, but we're keeping specific assets, and then we're using that profit to buy longer term assets. So for example, I didn't own any real rentals until the last couple of years. I probably could have owned a couple along the way, but then it would have limited my growth on the the company and the team and building a real business, right? So I think you need to make a decision, and that's individual for everybody, right? Like, okay, are you going to be an investor? Are you building a company? Like, what's your goal? So people would ask me, like, oh, why don't you own more rentals? Why don't you keep more? And my response would be like, well, right now I'm playing the long game. I want to build this thing up, and then I'll be able to buy more, assets. And now I have an 18 unit, along with another 5 or so rentals that we have. And now but that's happened really in the last like 18 months. So people are really trying to own and have all this passive income really early on. And I think that's kind of a mistake sometimes. Unless, maybe you're working a really great 9 to 5, you're making a lot of money, and then you could acquire a rental every year or 2 years. That's a different model than what I'm running. So I think you have to pay attention to what's your long-term goals, and then how that fits into the business model you're doing in this real estate investing space, and not get hung up on, oh, this person has this many doors and I don't have that many doors, because you could easily fall into that game.
It's a really easy trap to fall into.
Yeah, and I love it, right? Like, decide what you want. Do you want to be the guy that has doors? Do you want to be the guy that has the income? Do you want to be the guy that has the passive income? Like, what investing strategy is it you're looking for? Like you said, Alex, like, you passed on a lot of opportunities that we could have kept over the year or two. But on the flip side, we bought 18 doors in one hit. So if we would have held 18 single families along the way, that would have severely limited our growth. And we ended up getting 18 rent checks on the first of the month anyway.
Yep.
It just took a little bit of
and
a
there are
different
some
circle to get
assets
there.
too that you find across, or some properties are like, hey, this is a great Airbnb, or this is a great long-term hold. We like to hold properties that's built after 1990s in the Antelope Valley, because we just found like those require a lot less maintenance. They get rented out, a lot easier, and we like that asset to hold on to that. So I think that's part of you identifying that too for your buy box and hold box.
Yeah. So starting with Will, what is your why?
Yeah, I think ultimately the why, right? It really kind of fuels me, right? So my why happens to be my family, right? I grew up down in San Diego, single mom, and just watching what my mom did for me and for my twin brother really motivated me to say, hey, I want to be a pillar in my family. I want to be a rock in my family that my family can depend on, that can be there for not just my children, but for my parents, grandparents, and generations to come. So when I get up every day and I go to battle and I get to the grind, the number one thing on my family, or on my mind, is how do I put my family in the best position to move forward.
Awesome answer. So my big why is freedom. It's I'm a big fan of designing the life of your dreams and then going out there and implementing that. And to some degree, I've kind of done that. So being able to spend these priceless moments with my family, like in Hawaii, or doing some type of retreat or something with my team, or being able to fly one of my team members that's, done a special job to Hawaii or to Mexico. And just having that ability to choose like what I do with my time and who I spend my time with and what I do with all that is a big reason why, the big motivating factor for me. And right alongside that is my family, my mom and dad. They work, they're immigrants, from Mexico. They came here. They allowed me to have an amazing opportunity to, be here. So I'm very grateful for that. So, taking care of them is extremely important. So I'd say just having the freedom and the choices that having more resources and whether that's passive income or more active income or what real estate provides is something that is my big why, is that freedom, and then my family, my mom and dad, and being closer to my brothers.
What's your biggest struggle right now?
Right now, I think this 18 unit has taken up a good amount of capital, along with kind of the additional. We're rehabbing 7 of the vacancies that we have of the 18 units, so it's a value add play. So I think just that a large amount of capital investment we've had in that one has also put a little bit of less liquidity in for some of the other projects we have going. So I think on one side it is kind of a challenge. On the other side, we operate much more resourcefully, right? Where I think when things are all constantly on the upside, you tend to be a little bit more wasteful, or maybe not looking at all the maybe we don't need this additional charge of this and that. So I think it's really right now just the capital allocation that is right now being a little bit of a challenge. But we have 4 properties that we're right about to sell, and so that the challenge is constantly changed. Like in 3 weeks from now, that probably won't be the same answer.
Yeah.
But right now, I'd say that.
No, and I love that, right? Like, I think the challenges will consistently change. So if you had asked us this question, a couple months ago, it would have been completely different than it is now. And I think, like Alex said, in the future, that'll probably shift as well. But echoing what Alex said, I think the biggest struggle or challenge that we're having right now is, again, we're doing business in multiple states. Alex is traveling, I'm traveling, we're doing virtual stuff. So really taking a step back and making sure that the team is all structured and going in that same goal and knows which way the goal is, because we've had the goal, kind of shift, like, hey, we're acquiring properties, now we're looking at this multifamily. So making sure that everybody still knows the alignment. They say, when an airplane goes a degree off course, it can get that plane over, 80 to 100 miles off its destination. And so, when you see the market shift, when you see these other outlying sources come in to your main business, it's do we want to go that far off a business, and how can we quickly realign?
Yeah. How will you know when you're successful?
Love that one. That's a great question. I will know personally when I'm successful when I do not have to work, but I can make the choice to work, right? So when I know, hey, it's done. Like I could walk off into the sunset right now, but I would find success being in the position to say that I could do that, but that I still want more.
I would say I feel successful now because of some of the impact I made on other people in our tribe and people that we've helped get their first deal. And, we don't have a formal coaching or paid coaching or mentorship program. But I really derive a lot of satisfaction pushing people to get their first deal or to grow their past that first deal, because I remember what it was when I first started, and then what I've been able to kind of do in these 5 years. I feel like a lot of people could do. So I feel successful now. There's still a lot of goals that I have, but the reason I say that I feel successful now is because I get the DMs. I get people that that it makes my day. We're like, hey, I've been watching for a year, and then I started to make some offers, or I did this, and fill in whatever that is. And getting those messages are very fulfilling, because you've made an impact, or you're able to influence other people to improve their life. And for me, that's super valuable, because just trying to pay it forward, especially because I feel like overall it was very difficult for me to get this information. And so I'm almost like, I got these secrets. I want to let it all go and give everybody a chance to also, improve their life through real estate investing. So, yeah.
I can see that means a lot to you. Was there a time where you were having a hard time getting that information from other people?
Yeah, like when my path along the way of working for other investors, and just this constant feeling like, hey, they're just like, they would like kind of lie to me sometimes, like about what they spent on rehab, or they wouldn't want me to learn something specifically. And it was always kind of like this feeling of like, man, you guys are just kind of using me. And I didn't like that. And I don't want anybody to ever work with me to feel like that, like I'm just, kind of using them to get, increase my wealth or something. Right. It's like, and so, yeah, I'm passionate about that, because I feel like this business also was like the good old boys club.
Oh, yeah.
Where right,
It was for a
only certain
really
amount of
long
people
time.
had the information, and now with the internet and all the other stuff that's happening, there's a lot more information out there. So I think that's why I'm passionate about it, because I felt like along my path that like I was like the underdog. Like people didn't really want me to come up. People didn't want to give me all the information, but I was constantly in search. I was constantly learning, and I've always put the learning above the money. And now I don't have to worry that much about that side of things because of how much I learned, and then now I'm just sharing that. So
That's
other people
awesome.
can take action.
Awesome. What is your superpower?
I thought about this because I knew that you're probably going to ask this question, but I think creating connections is something that I'm great at, the genuine ones. I think people resonate with the way I kind of approach the business, and so I think building connections has been one of my superpowers. Yeah.
And I'll echo that. I mean, probably my superpower would be bringing life and energy into the room, right? Being in that room with people and being able to create, influences, create introductions, create business deals, create team members through your energy and your activity.
Yeah. And I've definitely experienced that, right? Being around you. What is the greatest lesson you have learned?
From real estate?
In general.
In general, man, the biggest lesson I have learned is to do unto others as you would want to have done unto you. A lot of times in business, you'll find that opportunity, like Alex said, where, you can kind of, hold somebody else back. And, like he said, he left those opportunities because that wasn't how he would have wanted to have been treated, right? So I think that that's the golden rule for a reason, right? And if you treat people a certain way, you'll just happen to notice that kind of reciprocates back to you. You know, if you're really happy with everybody, you'll just start to notice like, wow, like everybody's such in a happy mood. If you notice like, man, I really want to drive a red Ferrari, you're going to drive around and you're like, dude, I've seen 5 red Ferraris today.
Yeah.
Because you're putting that out there. And so if you put out quality interactions, quality communications, and quality, creations of relationships with people, I think that will ultimately lead you to success. So if you do unto other people how you would want to have done to you, I think that's the biggest lesson that I can take out of life so far today.
Yeah, I think for me, the variation of that, right? When someone's like, man, like everyone's a jerk, it's like, might be a reason for that. How about you, Alex?
That's a great question. I think what comes to mind is that change, that you have the power to change not only yourself, but your environment. And I think too many people settle for the life that they've been given, or the cards, or input, whatever challenge that you have, and they just use that as an excuse to not take action. And I think that my life has changed because I was very purposeful of where I wanted to go, and I was always willing to put in the work. So I think it comes down to you to just taking that mindset of like, I can change, I can improve, I can do better, I can do this. And then, your environment will slowly change because your actions will change. So I think for me, that's very important, because if I'm next year the same person I am right now, Steve, then I've completely failed.
Yeah.
Even if I'm the same person next month than I am right now, I think I've failed. So I'm constantly looking at how I can get better, because I know that I have faults. I know that I have a lot of things that I can, get better at. And so I think that's very important to recognize, like, where are the changes in your life that you can implement right now that make those improvements and then get you to where you want to go. So changes.
It's a lot of pressure on yourself for personal development. Yeah.
I'll check in with you next month, man. I expect a bigger, better version of you. All right.
I want an essay. I want a 5-paragraph essay on where you've grown.
Yeah.
What has been your favorite, best, or most interesting failure?
Failure? I would say in some regards, it's like the Hawaii, operation as a whole. I feel like, we haven't quite hit where we wanted to go when we originally, got there, and the deals that we did there. But it's just been such a magical experience to live in Hawaii, to enjoy the beautiful place that it is, get to know the vibe and areas. So I think on the business side, we've kind of failed in some ways. Even though we got some great deals and we haven't lost any money, I can't say that we failed. But what I wanted to do, and compared to actually what happened, I think it was a very interesting but fun failure that ultimately grew all of us. And, we have property that, if you'd like to go to Maui, let me know, Steve. I got you.
I mean, I have my eye on that Clint Eastwood house. You know what I'm talking about?
It sounds familiar. Did they list it recently?
No, it's not listed. It's just out by itself. It's far out in the water, right? I mean, it's just, I can't remember what hotel it is. Like Princess, one of those 5-star hotels in Maui, right? For our 10-year anniversary. And it's like this one house that's just out by itself, surrounded by nothing but beach in all directions.
I don't know where that's at. Wow, I
Yeah.
can't believe that.
So that's if I could figure out a way to say that.
Well, my biggest failure is not knowing where that house is, because if we could get that thing under contract.
Yeah.
Well, let's go look at it in a couple of weeks when we go to Maui.
So what about you, Will? Favorite, best, or most interesting failure?
Yeah, favorite failure for me was, I actually, before I got started in the Los Angeles Chargers and the NFL job I have, and before I got started with real estate, I was actually a nightlife VIP host, a nightlife promoter. And I'll say probably one of my biggest failures was my exit from the last nightclub I worked at. I, had a great relationship with this nightclub, and when my father had a heart attack, and he's perfectly fine now, so everything is good and recovered. But when he had a heart attack, the relationship I had with that nightclub deteriorated, and it deteriorated very quickly. And I think that was ultimately one of my biggest failures, was not knowing or not being able to see how to stop that from happening.
Mm-hmm. So what did you learn from it?
Well, I learned, obviously, like what Alex said, is that sometimes people don't have your best intentions at their heart, right? Sometimes there are people that are looking out for themselves first and you second. And so that provided me the opportunity to say, hey, where this might have felt super secure, it really wasn't, right? Because the true cards were played and the security was not there.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of people maybe listening to this podcast that think they have a safe job and might need to hear that message.
Yeah.
What book have you gifted more than any other, Will?
Man, biggest book for me, probably going to be Split the Difference. When you talk about a sales book, the guy's an FBI negotiator, and when I read Split the Difference, it really set my sales career in a different trajectory. It was, hey, you're not pushing a product, but you're more asking questions to find a solution. And if the solution happens to be your product, then you have a win-win situation there. And if it is not your product, then that's not a bad thing either.
Yep.
That just means, hey, you guys aren't doing business together. And you can amicably say, hey, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your pitch. This wasn't for me. Let's go different ways.
So let me shoot a hypothetical at you.
Yeah.
All right. So let's just say I convince Chris Voss to do an event with me, right? Day one, I talk about sales. Day two, he talks about negotiations. What's a reasonable price to charge for that?
Reasonable would be, I think...
Let me restate that. Maximum price.
Because I was going to say reasonable and what it's worth are two different things there, right? Like reasonable would be anything, over $50,000 I would pay, because again, that's 2 days, back-to-back days with arguably one of the better sales trainers and arguably one of the better negotiators in the country, right? So, Alex and I have, I think, what do we spend on coaching and mentorship this year? Close to $50,000. I mean...
At least 40, yeah.
Yeah, at least $40,000. So, I think somewhere in between, $5,000 to $25,000 is going to be pretty fair. And I would say it would really depend on how big the room is, right? Is it 25 people that have that one-on-one time?
And if I do that, I'm going to shoot for at least 100 people.
Yeah, or exactly. And even if it's 100 people, right? I mean, 100 people, you're going to have a one-on-one connection with Steve. You're going to have a one-on-one connection with Voss. You're going to have a one-on-one connection with 4 to 5, 10, 15 other people in that room. Like, what are those connections worth?
Yeah. So it's good to know, because I just found out that I'm super connected with a guy that's friends with him.
There you go.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book.
Yeah. What about you?
My most gifted book would be the book I mentioned earlier, which is Mastery by Robert Greene. I read it, perhaps it was at that pivotal point where I was just, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I already liked some of his other writing, but what it did for me was it got me into this mindset of, you have to really, to become a master of something and be one of the greats, ever, there's these paths there that other people have already done. And what I liked about the book so much was that it gave examples of previous masters, like, Leonardo da Vinci, and then gave examples of modern day masters. There was this other jet fighter guy that was in there, and some lady that designed cattle equipment for cattle and other types of breeding, livestock and whatnot. But it was just so interesting that they all had like little different paths, but there was something kind of in common that they all did. And just I approached mentors differently after that. I approached like the grind differently after that because I listened to the book and I also read it. And it's just very deep. It's a very meaty book. And not easy to just like read. Like, you know, some books are easier to read than others.
Yeah.
But Robert goes he goes in detail with a lot of stuff. And a lot of his books are written off of historical figures and data and things like that. So he really does his research. And so that book was just like one of my favorite books I recommend to a lot of people because even if you're not trying to become a master real estate investor, like it gives you the perspective, like what can you go out there and be like one of the best in the world at.
I'm gonna have to check that out because 48 Laws of Power, very interesting book, and there's some things in there that maybe it's best people don't know. But yeah, I'll have to definitely check out that book.
Yeah, it's different because 48 Laws of Power, I think, gets a lot of slack because some of the laws conflict with each other and kind of like almost like manipulation and things like that, right? But mastery is different.
All right,
I think
So
check it out.
Question from Gary Tatarian. So he's asking this for me, but I'd love to hear it from you guys. So how often do you celebrate your wins? Truthfully, another one of my failures. I don't celebrate wins enough. My team got me a trophy sitting over there to celebrate. Our year so far, but I don't celebrate my wins enough, and it's sadly one of those things I still do need to actively work on. So for you, how often are you celebrating your wins?
Well, I'm kind of spoiled in that regard that I kind of designed my life in a way where I get to do cool stuff pretty often, and I kind of plug it into my schedule. I plug it in every week on Sundays, like 2 or 3 cool things that I want to do for myself, and that could be going on a hike in Hollywood Hills. That could be going for a snorkel, in Maui if I'm there. That could be going to visit my aunt if I'm in Mexico.
That's doing cool things. That's different, right? But like, how often are you celebrating like wins, whether team victories, accomplishments?
I'd say we do that at least once a quarter because, like, for example, one of our things is once you get your first acquisition with us, if you're in the acquisitions department, then we'll fly you to Maui and have like a team trip there. So we do it quite often. I'd say we do it at least every quarter.
I have to work for you for a week.
Yeah, let's go.
Come bring us that deal. We'll fly you out to Hawaii. I'll echo what Alex said. For our acquisitions team, we're constantly doing the Maui trips and celebrations. But for example, on our weekly team meeting this week, we probably spent about 30 minutes of the meeting just going over how big of a team win our recent meetup was. It wasn't Alex and I. We basically both showed up. We got there an hour before the event started. But it was the team, everybody behind there. And so we spent a good half hour of our entire, all hands on, all staff, level 10 meeting, just kind of going over how cool of a win that was. And, obviously there's bonuses that we'll give out to some of our virtual team members that can't, be a part of those celebrations in person. But celebrating the team is very important for us because, again, we want to work with A+ players. And what we found is that people that are A+ players want to be celebrated in public and in private, right? Like that's just something that they want, right?
Yeah, and recognition is extremely important because for some people, that's almost as important as compensation.
As financial gain.
Yeah, because if you're not going to pay someone well, like for example, if you have somebody that's interning for you or somebody just getting started, they're probably not going to make a ton of money. So if they do a great job of stuff, you should be recognizing them because they're not getting the other side of things, right? But, and I also look at the other flip side of that where like, hey, if you're getting paid extremely well, then maybe you don't need as much recognition because you're getting the paycheck too. Right. But we're all wired a little bit different. And I think that for me, recognition is important. And once again, I probably would have stayed at the company longer if I would have gotten just a little bit better compensation package and more recognition.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. So I want you guys to think about what you want to leave the listeners with while I make a couple of quick announcements. Guys, if you guys got value today, please like, subscribe, share, comment, leave a 5-star review on iTunes. And then we do have our Sales Disruptors coming up in a couple of weeks. Will and Alex got a chance to check it out and, got $500,000 worth of value. So, if you guys are willing to invest in yourselves, check that out. We got Part in the Disruption tomorrow, and we got Certainty Talks on Friday. And next week, we got Forrest Blackburn, who helped Tarek build his wholesaling business, right? So if you want to learn from the guy that helped Tarek build his wholesaling business, check us out next week. All right. So last thoughts, I'll start with Will.
Yeah, I had spoken about this at our meetup that we had, last week in Los Angeles. But the one big takeaway I would give is, not giving up when you're 3 feet away from gold, right? Like, we had it in our business, right? We hit that 4 months, It was, hey man, like, is this working? Is it working? And if we would have given up right there, like, would we be here today?
Yeah.
You know, and it's you're 3 feet from gold. So my biggest piece of advice to anybody listening in today would be, you know, if you are putting in the grind, putting in the work, don't stop. You know, give it that extra day, give it that extra call. The power of that one extra call, the power of that one extra connection, the power of that one extra meetup. You know, it really can create alignment and growth for you that you'd never understand if you give up.
Okay, so one big thing for me is taking action, right? A little more than 4 years ago, Steve, I was on the other side of that camera watching you interview amazing people. Now I'm on stage here actually being interviewed. And why is that? It's because I took daily action. You know, I became obsessed about being great at something. You know, and I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about being great at something. And so to do that, you have to put in your reps. You have to go out there and take steps, and you're going to go through adversity. But the thing is, if you're clear about where you want to go, it'll help you deal with that adversity. And we live in an incredible country where you have all the opportunity in the world. So take advantage of it. Don't squander, you know, your talents. Like, I knew I was great on certain parts of this business, so I leaned into that. You might be great somewhere other part of the business, but just lean into it, take action, get around the right people. But there's no excuses for not succeeding. Because we all can make excuses. We all have them. But I never made an excuse. I grew up super poor. I grew up, you know, humble beginnings. But I made it twice already because of action and then just being obsessed and want to be great at something. So hopefully you guys can go be out there and be great. And our message, you know, resonates with you guys.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you sharing that. I mean, two of the things I love hearing, and I think I heard the other one earlier, is that you saw the show, you watched the show, you listened to it, and it's like, man, one day I'm going to be on it. You guys did that. So congratulations. That's awesome. And for me, I love that. That's one of the most fulfilling things for me. The other thing Josh said is I owe you guys plaques. All right?
Okay.
Is that accurate?
Yep.
Yeah.
Right? That's the other thing. So guys, if you're watching, you know, like put that on your vision board. Do whatever you guys have to do to inspire yourself, to motivate yourself. Because like for me, like that is the thing that's most fulfilling for me to hear. Hey, we want to be on the show. Now we're on the show. Hey, I want to be a millionaire. Now I'm a millionaire. Like that for me is incredibly rewarding. So thank you guys for sharing that with me.
Absolutely, Steve. Thank you for everything you do.
Steve.
Thank you guys. Thank you all. See you all tomorrow.
Shout out to Steve Trang. Jump on the Steve Trang. We real estate disruptors.